All right, so I'm here with the wonderful Huw Luscombe. And Huw, I always enjoy our chats. They're always very thought-provoking and groundbreaking. And I just want to share. I want people to share some of your wisdom, because we were talking about what we were talking about. We were talking about something you raised, Jesus and Einstein or something.
Jesus and Einstein are remarkably similar.
There we go.
Remarkable similarities between the life of Jesus and the life of Albert Einstein. Because it's sort of, even though these guys are 20 centuries apart, they were both Jewish. They both were refugees. They both took really complex systems that they were kind of brought up with and then simplified them into much more easily comprehended and more kind of beautiful systems. And even stranger, they were both asked to be the leader of the Jewish nation. So
Einstein was asked to be the leader of the Jewish nation.
Yeah. So after the triumphal entry, when Jesus comes into Jerusalem and people are singing Hosanna, Hosanna, and he's taking part in a ceremony that started way back in the days of King David, and he comes into Jerusalem on this donkey, and people put down palm leaves, what we now call Palm Sunday. And at that time, there were people saying, well, this man is, if this man is the Messiah, he should be the King of the Jews. And in fact, when he was crucified, sort of Pilate thought it was a joke to say, on his crucifixion, the notice which said what his kind of offence was. It's, Yesus Christos, King of the Jews. And which is kind of, Pilate thought it was a joke, but actually it was sort of profound. When the modern nation state of Israel was formed and they were looking for somebody to become the leader of this new nation, a whole lot of people actually, approached Albert Einstein and said, we need somebody to unite all the Hebrew people that are going to be coming back to Israel from all over the world. And we want you to be the first prime minister of this new nation state of Israel.
That's incredible.
So both of these men were asked to be the kind of, were rumoured to be or asked to be, and, if history had gone differently, could have been the leaders of the nation state of Israel. Even though the nation state of Israel didn't exist for 1,800 years, on either side of that, these men were both asked to be the leader, which is a kind of crazy coincidence, you could say.
Do we know why did Einstein refuse?
Oh, because he was an apolitical person. He never wanted to be involved in politics at all. He was aware that a number of things that he had postulated had been used very, very, very badly. And this is another unfortunate similarity between Jesus and Einstein, is that the things that they created were used for evil as well as good. So most of what we use in kind of modern technology, most mobile phones, particularly satellite communications, rocket travel, most of the kind of high-tech gadgets that we have nowadays are in some way connected with something that Einstein first postulated. So, you could not run a satellite network without an understanding of general and special relativity.
Right. Really? Wow.
And so... And so Einstein created, and postulated things like the splitting of the atom, E equals mc squared. You take a small bit of matter, it creates a huge amount of energy. And that eventually led to the Manhattan Project and the atomic bombs, which wiped out Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And in the same way, Jesus created this new way of living, which many people in subsequent generations have perverted, and terrible things have been done in his name. Like, awful things have been done in the name of Jesus, and using some of the ideas that Jesus first postulated. So, again,
Yeah, I mean, I've long said, both capitalism and communism are like the bastard children of Christianity.
well, they are, yeah, and so both of these men had this impact on world history where it would be impossible for us to imagine what the world would have been like if they had not been there. Like nothing in our world would look the same if it wasn't for the things that Jesus said and did, and what people who have followed Jesus' teachings have said and done over the last 1,800 years. And nothing in our world would be the same if we did not have the breakthroughs that were made by Albert Einstein. So there's just it's this incredible kind of meshing of all of these things where these people, these two men, have had this just indescribable effect on human history. And they were both Jewish, and they were both, theistic. They both very strongly believed in God, and they both, were refugees, and they were both, they both said things that didn't make sense to people at the time, but later on were shown to be deeply profound. And they also both did most of their really important work before they turned 35. So, like Einstein did all this really important work, but the last half of his life was just spent helping people to work out how they could design experiments to prove or disprove what it is that he had previously postulated.
So when did he come up with the relativity?
Well, say so 1908, I think it was 1909. He was 20, his late 20s. He wrote 3 papers in 1 year, any of which could have won him the Nobel Prize. But because he released all 3 of them in the 1 year, I don't know if it was 1908 or 1909, one of those. Because he wrote 3 papers in 1 year, they gave it to him on the one they could understand, which was the one on Brownian motion, I believe. And the other 2 were like, no one could get it. So it was only later they went, yeah. So, I mean, if he'd released those papers in different years, he probably would have won 3 Nobel Prizes. But, he wasn't that was how he did stuff. I mean, both of these men were massively misunderstood, by the vast majority of people that they lived amongst. Jesus was hated by all the Jewish, well, I shouldn't say all. Jesus was hated by the vast majority of the Jewish teachers of his time, the rabbis of his time. A few of them got it, but most of them didn't.
The Pharisees and the Sadducees.
The Pharisees, Sadducees, the teachers of the law. And Einstein, in the lead up to the first big war, one of the leading German scientists is a guy called Fritz Haber, who invented the process for splitting nitrogen. He was a genius. And he kind of wrote this paper about how, German scientists were the best in the world and everybody else should get out of the way. And he got all of these German scientists to sign it. And the one guy who refused to sign it and actually wrote a paper opposing it was Albert Einstein. So it's kind of like both of these guys were out of kind of sync with the most of their peers. And they wrote about things and did things that other...
Why was there the thinking that German scientists were the best in the world at the time, and why did Einstein disagree?
Well, I mean, it could be argued that the German scientists thought they were best in the world at the time because they were able to, particularly in the field of chemistry, they were jumping ahead in their understanding of how chemical bonds formed. Their understanding of probably my favourite physics, because I studied physics at university for 4 years, and my favourite physical, my favourite theory, or even idea in the whole realm of physics was developed by a guy called Werner Heisenberg, the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. And so the Heisenberg uncertainty principle says that you can never say exactly where an electron is. So you have the nucleus of the atom, which is the protons and neutrons in the middle, and then there's this, we were told that these electrons whiz around the outside. But Heisenberg said, actually, no, the electrons are like a cloud, because you cannot say where the electron is. And if you can find it, then by the time you've found it, it's moved. And if you measure its velocity, then the act of measuring its velocity and its direction will change its velocity and direction. So you can never actually say where the electron is. All you can say is there's a very high probability it's in this cloud around the nucleus. And if you put something close enough to it, the electron will eventually hit it. But you can't actually say where the electron is.
It's sort of like the concept of now, isn't it?
Yeah.
In the minute, to have the concept, it's past.
Exactly. Yeah.
Even in saying the word, there's a beginning and an end to the word, and so the actual now moment has gone.
It can never be actually. Yeah, and so anyway, Werner Heisenberg was probably one of the most brilliant scientists of the. Oh, sorry, I've got low battery. I have to plug in. He was. What have I done? Have I gone to low power mode? Sorry, I'll just plug in.
No, that's all right.
Sorry about that, brother.
We'll take a break. I'll splice it.
There you go.
Oh, sweet. There we go.
So now the thing about Heisenberg was that he was in Germany under the Reich, and the Americans.
So this is Wilhelm II, yeah?
No, under the Reich of Adolf Hitler.
Oh, sorry. Okay, sorry.
Yeah,
I was back in
Heisenberg
1909.
Later,
Okay.
After he was a much younger man than Fritz Haber, but
Got it.
Heisenberg. So
hang on. Haber was a younger man than Einstein.
Split the nitrogen atom and worked out how to. Right. Up until Fritz Haber's Born-Haber process, the only way you could get nitrogen to split was legumes in plants. So the only way you could get nitrogen into your soil was to stop planting whatever it is you're planting after 3 or 4 years and just leave the field and grow legumes.
Like fallow.
The legumes would fix more nitrogen in the soil.
Wow.
But Fritz Haber said, actually, if we can create a massive amount of pressure and a massive amount of temperature and stick the right catalysts in, we can actually break the nitrogen atom into ammonia. Wow. And then we can use that to make fertilizer. And that one kind of discovery meant that we could then, instead of having fields fallow every 3 years, we could just use the fields every year and just whack all this nitrogen fertilizer in.
Wow.
And grow much more food. That was one of the things. Anyway, getting back to where we were. Sorry, I get distracted easily.
No, please. No, that's great.
Heisenberg was working, because he was German, he was working with the Reich, with Adolf Hitler's government. And if you study, if you've seen the film about the man who ran the Manhattan Project.
Oppenheimer. Yes,
Oppenheimer.
Great film. Was that a factual representation?
Most of it's pretty good. There's a few. I'm not sure that they actually a lot of stuff is ambiguous. But certainly Oppenheimer was much more involved in the process. And I don't know that, like, once he had created this terrible weapon, you know, he talks about how he tried to put the genie back in the bottle, but he was fully aware that once, and it becomes particularly poignant because the Americans and the Allies believed that Werner Heisenberg was capable of making an atomic bomb.
Right.
Right. So their big justification for spending, you know, we're talking the 40s here. They spent $3 billion US, right? Like that's like, so that would be the equivalent of, you know, trillions today. That they spent this massive amount of money. You know, and the US at that stage, because of getting out of the Depression, Roosevelt introduced this 90% tax rate for people who were very wealthy. So if you made $1 million in the US, anything over $1 million, you paid 90% tax. You only got 10% of it back.
What?
That's how they funded, you know, the New Deal to get out of the Depression. That's how they funded the war, and that's how they then funded the space race. It was in there right up until the late 60s because they kept on coming up with new reasons for taxing all the super rich so much. And, you know, most of the super rich either just came up with ways to avoid it or just paid it because they thought they had to win the war or to get out of the depression, whatever. Anyway, the point was, so Werner Heisenberg would have been able to, if he had been given the material, make an atomic bomb. And the justification the Americans had for doing it was, we've got to get it before the Germans get it.
Right.
And then as time goes on and Heisenberg becomes more and more aware of how messed up and how crazy the regime is, he eventually gets smuggled out of Germany. And he goes out into the desert where they're making the atomic bomb in New Mexico. Right. And he meets with Oppenheimer, and they then realize that actually the Germans are nowhere near. They haven't even got far past the first really basic steps to start making an atomic bomb.
Wow.
And at that point, they could have gone, okay, they're not going to get one for a very long time. We can stop now.
Yeah.
But they didn't. And so it's like, there's also, according to one aspect of atomic theory, there was a possibility that exploding a thermonuclear device would actually irradiate the entire atmosphere of the Earth.
Yeah, I think, and they even addressed that in the film.
They talked about that in the film. Yeah. But so these people were actually making bets on the end of the world.
No, it's insane. It's absolutely madness.
And you kind of go,
you get the whole Planet of the Apes. You blew it. They blew it up. You blew it up. You maniacs.
Yeah, well, and you just look at that stuff and you kind of go, okay, I don't know how you
Mad scientist destroys the world. It's crazy, man.
Anyway, that was to me there were a couple of key moments in that whole process of creating this crazy and like ludicrous arms race that we've had for the last 75 years. And there was a couple of moments where they could have just stopped. And they didn't, you know, and okay, we could actually irradiate the entire atmosphere and kill every living being on the planet.
It raises all sorts of stuff about, you know, just because you can do something, should you? And I think we're approaching that. Well, you know, with AI, the stuff that's going on now with AI and generative art, and where there's a society-changing aspect to this, you know, in terms of, look, I've done rants about this, you know, robbing people of, you know, the things that give us purpose and reason and meaning.
Totally, yeah.
And they're being taken. It's being taken from us.
Yeah,
and it's that question. Aside from, thankfully, there's a lot of pushback against it because there is there's the environmental aspect as well. It uses an incredible amount of energy and water.
Yeah.
But it's just the potential society destroying out. Well, I think it's already causing so many people who create to lose hope, especially younger people.
Yeah.
And so, how many people will just not even bother?
Well, yeah, and just as in the 1940s, these people are making bets on the end of the world.
It's that thing of like,
okay.
It would have been better to have not made nuclear weapons. It would have been better to not make generative AI. It would have been better to not make chemical weapons that we've now banned.
Yeah.
And it's a funny road, isn't it?
Well, yeah, and I don't know how far down this rabbit hole you want to go, but there are people messing around with biological agents, and as we've seen, in the last 5 years, how badly wrong that can go. With people messing around, and these people are making bets on the end of the world, and it's like at some point, we're going to get it. We got to this point with the coronavirus, the whatever you want to call it, that we were kind of actually it did end a lot of people, and so really bad ideas do actually kill people. I was talking to a friend the other day who has just helped some people get out of the Scientology movement, which is, I don't know, the motherlode of all bad ideas. And, and this guy was saying that getting people out of Scientology is not just about, returning them to their families. The alternative is like a significant number of these people that are in Scientology and are then trying to get out end up taking their own life. Now, you can never say
after they've gotten out or while they're in the process?
No, no, while they're in the process. Now, the whole thing about people taking their own life is, most historical events are multifactorial, and something like someone taking their own life is massively multifactorial. There are a lot of factors that lead to it. But if you look at the suicide rate of people in Scientology, it is mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing. And so, this is not just, it's a bad idea. Well, I choose this and you choose that. I like red and you like blue, whatever. No. This idea may well kill you, and the ideas that Adolf Hitler had killed lots of people, like millions of people. And this idea of messing around with this virus killed millions of people. So and all these people are saying this AI thing, it may well kill a lot of people, because as you say, if your whole life is about creating something, and in one sense that's what we're all here to do. I mean, what does God say to Adam and Eve in the garden? Go and create. Go and do something. Like, you're procreators. I created, so you can create.
Yep.
And if people can no longer do that, then some of them are going to take their own lives. And it's like,
or just lose hope, and
especially or live in a way where they are not actually living. And it's I don't know how these people kind of work out. Okay, this is a good idea. And for somebody like Einstein, he's releasing this thing into the world, and he's without any kind of ability to stop people doing the wrong thing with it. And when Jesus comes into the world, he releases these ideas into the world, and he's not able to stop people abusing them and using them badly. And history is littered with people who supposedly, were...
Well, you could argue, actually, I mean, an omnipotent God, he is able to he could prevent it, but he's allowing the human free will and free choice, and
and people will push that as far as they can.
Yeah,
they will create things that will actually, and the problem is, like, there's a bell curve of people.
So I want to touch just
Yep.
just on the nature of evil, like because how to deal with it. So because people use that as an accusation against God, right? Like he allows all this stuff to happen.
Yep.
Why, God, are you allowing bad stuff to happen? And I think where I've landed on that is a couple of things. One is that, like I said, like that's part of the free will that he's given us, which is necessary for love to exist, right? So It's a flip side. So it's like, why didn't God make robots? Because he wants love, human love, to exist and people to choose him and seek him out. And so giving us the freedom to completely go against his will. And I see them in two ways. I see macro will and micro will, in the sense that it is God's macro will that we have the freedom to reject his micro will, as in, his specific intent for our lives, or even to follow his laws and this sort of thing. That all falls under, it's his macro will that we can just ignore him and for people to do all sorts of evil. Now, but that said, I do believe that we often don't have a problem. Like we've said, we're made in the image of God, and we've said that we don't. There's not a problem. A lot of people don't have a problem with the idea that God's love is much bigger than human love. Yes, or his compassion. Like, he loves everybody. He loves the whole world. Jesus died for everybody. Like, his love dwarfs mine. He can love the most unlovable person, and allows him to keep existing. That's the other thing, right?
Yeah.
But that then follows, like, all our attributes. So our anger at injustice. Well, God's anger at injustice dwarfs the capacity for our own. God's, sadness at humans desecrating things that he's created. And that idea is entailed in, if God forgives all sin, even the sins that are done to us, then he is the primary one offended by even things that happen to us. So that means the things that upset you and wound you and grieve you, God is even more grieved and upset and saddened by what has happened to you than you are, which is quite a profound thing. So we can take heart, I think, in when we look at all the evil or the horrible things that have gone on in the planet. And we go, well, God is seeing that, and God is more upset about it than we are. Yet he is allowing it for whatever reason so that human love can exist. And so I love, and C.S. Lewis has a beautiful statement on that, where he says, if God has decided that is the cost for love to exist, then we have to just trust that that's what that is. And we see, in Jesus that he identifies with, well, even the God of the Old Testament, God through the Old Testament identifies with the suffering, with the widows and the orphans and the poor, and how we treat those less fortunate than ourselves, or those we're responsible for, or those weaker than us. They matter immensely to God. So that's where I land with that.
I think I've read two books that really helped me to understand human evil. The first one was The Great Divorce, again by C.S. Lewis, by Clive Staples Lewis. And The Great Divorce is actually not a very long book. And I would have thought that I'd learn more about evil from the Screwtape Letters, and I found the Screwtape Letters to be very entertaining and very kind of insightful. And if you can get a hold of the audio files of John Cleese reading the Screwtape Letters, it's absolutely brilliant.
That's great.
It's great. But like, even though I enjoyed it and thought it was very clever, it didn't actually help me unpack evil much. Whereas if you read The Great Divorce about this guy that takes this bus trip from hell up to heaven, and then he encounters these people, and in one sense, each of the people that gets encountered is dealing with one aspect of human evil, and so there's, and that's really, I mean, I think that The Great Divorce is one of the most helpful books I've ever read. Another really helpful book by a less known writer is a guy called M. Scott Peck. Now, I don't know why the Americans initialized their first name. I don't know what his first name is, but he's called M. Scott Peck. And M. Scott Peck's he was a psychiatrist in the American Army. He grew up in New York from a wealthy family, but and he wrote this book called The Road Less Travelled, which is
yes, he did.
Takes its title from a Robert Frost poem.
Yes.
Two paths diverged in yellow wood, and I being one person long, I stood, blah blah. And it talks about, I took the road less travelled, and this has made all the difference. And that book was on the New York Times bestseller list for 250 weeks for like 5 years. And after that, he wrote a book about his encounters as a psychiatrist, his encounters with what he believed to be human evil. And the book was called The People of the Lie.
Wow.
And he uses all these case studies of people that he's counseled, and he talks about how the only way to describe this is that there was evil. But he makes a really good point several times. He says that, we used to have words in days gone by. We don't use any more words. Like there was this word acedia, A-C-E-D-I-A, acedia. And acedia was like spiritual laziness. And he says that evil is more about turpitude, more about laziness than actually doing bad things. Because evil things happen when people can't be bothered doing the good thing that is hard. And it has been said, the only necessary precondition for evil to flourish is for good people to do nothing. And Peck kind of takes that further and says that the only time evil actually happens is when people can't be bothered to do the right thing. And over time, things just get worse and worse and worse. And watching what's happening in the world, you can start to see that unfolding in real time, in all sorts of areas. And so in the end, you have to have some terrible kind of reckoning to kind of deal with the fact that people didn't do things earlier.
Well, there's another. I have a view on that. So I lump evil in with, I guess. I have a couple of definitions for it, but if you can go bigger a bit and just call it negativity. So so not just evil, but negative, so death, pain, loss, hunger, negative experiences, or just negativity. Period. And it's the and again, this is where I sort of land on it, is that, well, the things like dark, cold, space, they don't actually exist. They're nothing. Even the idea of nothing. They're just concepts for a lack of something else. And so they only can exist in the face of the positive that they're describing the lack of. And so what is positive is so much more powerful. And again, to reference the Great Divorce, where C.S. Lewis talks about hell being the tiniest, not even the tiniest blade of grass in heaven. And so if these things, like hunger is the lack of food, tiredness is the lack of energy, loneliness is the lack of relationship and companionship. But the flip side of that, of course, is, that the fish doesn't know it's wet, right? So we only actually have awareness of the positive, or a full understanding. Obviously, you can experience something without. It's like to reference George MacDonald, who C.S. Lewis called his master. The protagonist has a conversation with Adam, where he says, "Yes, you think you know the sun because you experience it every day, but you actually don't know. You don't know anything about it." So having a full concept of a particular thing is only possible, I would say, by knowing its opposite, by knowing the lack of it. Or so we fully understand what life is because there's not life before and there's death. We appreciate, and there's all of those the blasé sayings. You don't know what you got till it's gone, But there's a truth in that. And a response there to live is to try and live with an awareness of what you have before it's gone, so that you don't have to have that great teacher of losing it to inform you. But here's where I go with that, is that, well, that means that all of those negative things actually have positive value. Isn't that wild? So if they're teaching you things, and this is the thing about pain, and we see this in the Bible when it says, suffering brings perseverance, perseverance builds character, character builds hope. That even through negative experiences and through pain and loss and death and hardship and experiencing evil, we actually gain so much. And so that then what is actually negative actually shrinks and shrinks and shrinks and shrinks and shrinks and shrinks. And even, C.S. Lewis talks about like that an evil person, what is truly evil, like let's say the thief, possessing something is good. Using intelligence and strength and this sort of stuff is all good to acquire the thing. Resourcefulness, but it's like perverted at a point where it's like, no, you're causing another person suffering. And so I define evil in two ways. In the context of God, I just define evil as just going against the will of God, right? In a human context, I define it as pursuing your agenda at the expense of others' benefit. And good would be pursuing another's benefit at the expense of your own agenda, at the cost of your own agenda, right? And so there's that thing of like, well, and if that's the dividing line, and so taken to an extreme, you have Adolf Hitler, wiping out, or Stalin or Mao, wiping out millions of people to pursue their own agenda, or you have a Mother Teresa character who just devotes their whole life to helping other people suffering. Yeah. But it's the Soulsy thing, right? That Solzhenitsyn, we can defeat evil every day. We choose good, because all of us are capable of heinous atrocity. It just requires going bugger everybody else. I'm just going to do my thing, and to hell with everybody. Any of us could do that, but we don't. We don't. And we defeat evil every time we do the right thing. And that's the thing with in getting back to, picking, creating AI or AI, I think ultimately comes down to, greed. Mm. And like you're saying, yes, it's harder to do the right thing. Yes, it's harder to lay down your own agenda and help another person. You're hungry, you're tired, you want to go to bed, but you've got to carry this person to hospital or they're going to die. Well, there's a cost to that. You're thirsty, you want to take the drink, but there's another person who looks like they need it more and you give them the water. There's a cost to that. Yes, it's harder. Yeah. But that's how we do it, where it's like, no, I'm laying down my own agenda for the benefit of this other person. That's doing good. And how did we ever get onto that?
Well, I think I think I.
Oh, with the evil, yeah, you were talking about the growing evil, and so, and it takes for good people to do nothing. Now, but that's where I'm like, but yes, but as said, we can defeat evil. Maybe we're not resisting an evil person, but the Bible actually says don't resist an evil person, repay evil with good. And imagine a world where people were not afraid of retaliate, like of where because I think, we're talking about you brought up the atomic bomb. They were afraid of the Germans getting it first, and so much defensiveness, so many city walls, so many weapons have been built. People expend so much energy on their own personal, financial, physical defense out of the fear that something will go wrong. Like all the money we spend on insurance, for crying out loud. And, the guns. Rampant gun ownership because people are afraid of a person bursting in their house and attacking their kids.
There's two aspects to it which I find remarkable. One is, the complete hyperabundance that the Lord has given us. So, like, the sun shines. Now, in order for the sun to shine, it loses 11.5 megatons of matter per second. Right? Now, it's going to continue ripping through 11.5 megatons of matter every second for the next 2 million years. It's just going to keep on belting out that much energy, right?
Wow.
And then inside your own body, your body makes, what is it? I can't remember the exact number, but it's something like 800,000 red blood cells a minute, right? Your red blood cells last about 2 weeks, and there's, if you're my size, you've got about 7 litres of this stuff pumping through your body, and your body, your bones remake that fluid or a significant part of that fluid every 2 weeks. Like, amazing. There's just this massive hyperabundance. The back of your eyes have something like, an average person has 107 million receptor cells in the back of each of their eyes. Like, there's this massive hyperabundance that we live within, and so that energy from the sun strikes the earth, and that causes all the plants to grow and all the animals. And so the most useful stuff in the known universe is fresh water, because there's a whole lot of stuff that you can do with water.
Right.
And the thing that we need most to survive falls from the sky.
Yeah.
And we don't do anything. Just this thing that we have to have all the time, it just falls from the sky because we happen to be exactly the right distance from this thing belting out 11.5 megatons of matter worth of energy every second, so that there's this, water exists in these 3 states, and we're not so far away so it's always ice, and we're not too close so it's always gas, but it's the right distance. So when we need this really important thing, it just falls from the sky, literally falls from the sky on us.
It's fantastic.
And you kind of go, it's the kind of hyper-abundant world you live in, and yet somehow I have to get it all. I have to. I know people that have.
No, I know.
And look, I know, and it's
the hunter-gatherer. Like, if we were all living as hunter-gatherers, it's like, God just, put all the food, just on trees. We just have to go and pick it off.
Exactly.
Or pull it out of the ground. Or cow. They're just walking around. There's food just walking around all the time.
Exactly. It's crazy. And this most useful thing we need to. And so this idea that somehow I have to grab this and hold on to it, when actually more of it will just fall on us if we just don't worry. And Jesus says this in Matthew 7, Matthew 6. Don't worry. Don't worry about tomorrow. The rain will come. All this stuff will happen. Like, there's so much stuff to get on with, rather than worrying about hoarding all this stuff for yourself. I mean, it's crazy and it's evil. And we get to this point where the craziness to me is just it was so evident earlier this year. 2 years ago, last year, we had a change of government, and our old government decided to spend $360 billion to buy machines to protect us from our major trading partner. What? So hang on a sec. So the people that we trade the most with, the people that rely upon us for coal and iron ore and food, these people supposedly we need to protect ourselves from, because why? And we're going to spend $360 billion that we don't have, like on machines whose only job is to come up out of the water and blow the shit out of something.
Yeah, and it's like a deterrent.
It's a deterrent. And you kind of go, hang on a sec, like there must be another better way of doing this, which isn't going to, I mean, they're worried about the increase in the funding of the NDIS. They're worried about making more houses. None of those things would be a problem if we weren't buying these stupid submarines. It's like, okay, sure. And you kind of go, these people didn't ask, I mean, in terms of, and I talked about this before, but in terms of kind of cost per taxpayer, it's at least $35,000 per taxpayer. Now, they're saying it's going to be over 30 years. Well, fine. So my kids, every one of them, is going to be paying an extra $1,000 tax every year just to pay for these stupid submarines. We're not talking roads and schools and hospitals. We're talking an extra $1,000 tax on everybody's bill for the next 30 years just to pay for these stupid submarines. And you're kind of going, did anybody ask the kids that are just finishing school now, oh, look, by the way, do you want to pay an extra 30, on top of your HEX debt and everything else, an extra 30 grand so you can buy these machines that kill people? And, and what are the other guys going to do? Well, they're going to, I mean, this story's repeated over and over.
They're going to get technology that, to blow up those.
And so, one of the things that led to the First World War was the fact that everyone was spending so much money on military hardware that in the end, the war was almost inevitable because of all the money people were spending on this arms race. Yeah. And you'd think they would have worked out, oh, that didn't work. Let's not do that again. No, it just, and you kind of go, what, how? I just don't.
No, and the frightening thing will be, I guess, just to reference AI again, will be if they get the AI drones and this sort of stuff, or the micro drones, micro AI sort of. I mean, the possibilities are. Look, it definitely feels. I don't know, man. Look, it feels to me like we're in last days. Like there's a tempo, a rising crescendo.
Yeah.
But the funny thing. So at the fall of Constantinople, around the 1400s, and there were a lot of Christians. City full of theologians, some would have said. And they were around that period. People were all filled with last days. Prophecies and this sort of stuff, and they were
convinced it was one sense, wasn't it?
The end of days, and well, it was while it wasn't the last days of the entire world, it was their last days.
It was the last days of the Greek Orthodox Church, like it really was
of the Roman Empire. I mean, because they were the inheritors of the Roman Empire that had gone back to Augustus, and they were right. They were wrong about. About the scope of it, but they were right that yes, it was the end of, and so and maybe that's where we are now. Maybe it's the end of, I don't know, America, the Western civilization or something. I don't know, but it just it's like it's gone. There needs to be a substantial something.
Yeah, I mean,
Substantial rethink or a reorganize. But you know what? Look, but that's what war does too. Is it totally? I mean, the world massively changed after World War One.
yeah,
And World War Two.
The world we have now, basically, the borders were drawn
after World War Two.
Yeah, after World War Two,
pretty much.
And really, they have.
And yet, people today, I don't think they understand how fluid. It's so funny when you know. Like just even how people will say, oh, there are these sort of people living there, and, you know, as though they've always been there.
Yeah.
And like, oh, you know, this sort of people are in this place, you know. So, well, people have moved, man. Like the borders were fluid. Like at one point, the Celts had pretty much all of Europe, but there were people there before the Celts. There were the West, you know, the Basques, the West Mediterranean, and people have moved around. You know, it's like borders have substantially shifted. Oh, the Pict in Scotland. We're talking about the what we call the Scots now. They were actually Northern Irish, the Dalriad Scots, and the people in what we call Scotland were Picts, and it was so in between Rome and the Saxons, the Scots, you know, but in between the Roman and the English taking Scotland, the Dalriad Scots of Northern Ireland migrated over into Scotland and booted or absorbed, or we don't know what happened to the Picts. So, you know, I mean, Europe's just filled with that. The Bulgars, like originally from Asia, although the Bulgars, I believe they're whether they're how many are actually the original Bulgars and how many are Slavic, who knows? Yeah. And but the Magyars from Hungary, they weren't there. They're related to the Finns, and they came over from, you know, on horseback. Was stopped by a German, the tribal leader or king or whatever, and said, just kind of hang here on the Great Fold, the Great Plain. And, I mean, humans move around, but I think that's part of, I think God wants us to move around. I think that, again, talking about negativity and discomfort, like if we were in absolute bliss, you know, like, no pain, no negativity, no nothing, and why would we even shift our head? We would just stay there, right? Just like experiencing absolute bliss. There's no reason. It's like discomfort, but then, you know, you get discomfort and you move your head around, now the room looks different. You get hungry and you go looking for, there's an orange, or we discover orange, you know, different colors and different, and you know, it's like, so negative impetus, you know, or just the dissatisfaction, the itch. Some of this I got from gaming, you know, where like I played a game called Morrowind years ago, and you know, they devised little things for you to do, problems to solve, or issues to think that would just take you to different parts of the game that they'd created, you know, and just like, this is cool, you know, there's this thing that, and I feel some of life is like that, you know, the again, negative catalyst. And it can lead to greater discovery and knowledge and joy. And ultimately, if we're seeking God through it all, you know, and if He's reflected in His art, then the more of it we discover, the more you know, understanding we have of God. Like the bombardier beetle, I just discovered that the other day. Or you know, his genius in just the different colours or sounds or where was I going to go with that? You know what? I was also referencing today with a friend, Johnny. Well, it's ultimately Nine Inch Nails' song "Hurt." Yes. Trent Reznor wrote it, but Johnny Cash's version is who I was directing. I was directing him to Johnny Cash's version because it's like that has so much more gravitas and so much more weight because of his age when he sang it. You know, and the length of his life, and the words had so much more power because it's a man at the end of his life singing the word. You know, if I could start again a million miles away, I would keep myself. I would find a way, and it's that thing of you can go through all this bullcrap, 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 and what you gain can be so precious, so precious. that if you were able to undo all of that, you would. It's like no. I have to keep what I found through all of that crap.
Yeah, I've watched that clip several times. You know, I found the most interesting. His daughter saw the film clip before his wife did, because he got married to a singing lady, didn't he?
June Carter Cash. Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
June Carter Cash.
They performed together. Yeah.
And their daughter saw the film clip before June did, and she rang her mother and said, "Dad's just done a new film clip. Be very careful." That's what she said. When you watch this, be very careful. Now, you know, what does that mean? I've got no idea. But I thought it was a funny thing, you know, oh, shit. Oh, I better ring Mum. Mum, listen, there's this film clip and, because obviously she's going to watch it. It's like best if you didn't watch it, but if you do watch it, just be very careful, you know, like, wow, you know. It's very powerful. It's a very powerful version of that song.
Oh, my gosh, yeah.
And
the original is powerful too, but that's not to take away from Reznor's version. But it's amplified. Cash's version is
amplified because of his position, and it's also, and I don't have a problem with that. I think, you know, you look at guys like, you know, Leonard Cohen, and other people, you know, have done better versions of his song than he did. I mean, you know, you look at that young. So you got this young Catholic kid from California singing a song written by a Jewish bloke from Canada, and the young Catholic kid from California has a completely kind of new take on it, which was, you know, and so people kind of discovered that song, and you know, I think probably, you know, just about anybody does a Dylan song better than Bob Dylan, because, you know, he wrote great songs, but he couldn't sing for shit, you know, like it was like, that's the thing, you know, so some people are great at writing, but other people are better at, you know, singing, you know, like
interpreters, so interpreting a cover, well, look, I do cover songs, and I do my own songs, and when I'm doing a cover, you know, because when you're singing a song that you've written, you've already expressed within the lyric and the melody choices, right? And so whereas when I'm singing something someone else has done, I have to find other ways to inject myself in that, and that's in the performance, in the delivery, in the you know, so it's you know, but that's the value in collaboration and cooperation.
Oh, totally. Yeah, totally.
Is people bringing their own, you know, bringing more to the table. That's why a band, it's more likely that a band, or the funny thing is what we call a band, but I mean, like solo artists will collaborate, you know, with a producer or with other writers or with different players. It's, you know, it'll be called like one person. But I mean, like Madonna's album Ray of Light, I mean, that's like a William Orbit record with Madonna singing on it, you know. Not to disparage Madonna, but that's one way you could look at it. And I mean, Cliff Richard had that with that album that had Two Strangers or whatever. In time there were two strangers. In time the strangers met and fell in love, but time can't hold such strangers. And time does not forget. And of course, underneath that melody, there's all these chord changes, right? Because it sounds the same when you without them. But anyway, but the producer, I think he wrote most of the songs as well, but of course Cliff's the solo artist, and you know, the main lead voice. But I think even the producer was doing backing vocals and stuff on it, if I'm not mistaken. But that's the value in collaboration, and you know, standing on the shoulders of giants, I guess. And that's if we're going back to Einstein, you know, it's, you know, he births all of this stuff that then you know, other people are able to, you know, leapfrog off. But now here, actually, and this gets to something I've held, and that is that creative talent, and you could expand this, I guess, to anything that people can build from. So maybe it's you know, scientific genius, you know, I don't know, any sort of talent. But I know creativity, and so I want to speak from that place. And that is that. So creative talent doesn't just belong to the person in whom it resides. So God's given people gifts. God's given you gifts. Boom, here's what you can do. This cool stuff. Boom, boom, boom. And in that, imagine if Shakespeare had, he'd been given all of this ability to write cool plays and whatever, and grab stories from the, focus them into this way that people can perform it. Imagine if he hadn't. If he'd been, I'm just gonna write for myself and just keep it here and not share it and not empower all these other people that have co-created as a result of him, of his artistic expression. And like you're saying with Einstein, all of these people that have furthered human understanding about our universe because he was able to put those ideas out there. And so it's like I don't know, and that sort of keeps me going, even when when it's like, well, who's listening? No one. Or how much money am I making? Nothing. It's like, it's that thing of you just got to keep doing it. If God's put it in you, it doesn't just belong to you. Share it. Share.
And that also comes back to this hyperabundance thing. Like God has kind of thrown this hyperabundance of gifts out into the world, and all these people that have got all these amazing gifts, and there's so much of it, and it's just, you don't need to kind of hold it. My sister interviewed Michael Jackson, and in the middle of this interview, anyone listening to this, my sister is the editor of Time magazine in New York, in case you didn't know. And she's interviewing Michael Jackson. She's interviewed lots of people. And while she's interviewing him, he stops and he starts writing furiously on this bit of paper. And she said, "Oh, sorry, I'm interrupting." He goes, No, I'm just going to write this down before God gives it to Prince. Which is like, and he actually, because so
are you serious? That's fantastic. That's the antenna theory. Oh, that's great.
And so it's kind of like,
that's hysterical.
He was aware where all that came from. Now, obviously, Michael was a very strange man. He had some strange ideas, but he was also
great. No, that's great. So that's even an extension of just the gifts and talents to actually.
It is, so it's
the giving. Yeah, that's amazing.
Because
Paul McCartney thought, yesterday. I mean, the way that popped out, almost as a complete song, and
yeah,
that's awesome. Wow.
Yeah, and there's also this. When I was a young man, so if you ever read René Girard, who's a French philosopher, he said, every person lives out the life. Every person's life, or every person lives out. I get it right because it's in French. Every person lives out the thoughts of a dead philosopher. Either you choose one, or one is chosen for you. So the world kind of is kind of formed by sort of philosophical ideas, and probably the most in my understanding, the most significant kind of philosopher who built the world that we're in was Soren Kierkegaard, because he was he was an existentialist, but he was a Christian existentialist. So he kind of took the thought forms of Christianity, and then he kind of said, well, this is how this new stuff that we're working out about our existence is kind of reflected in Christianity. But he also refused to kind of be kind of led by anything that wasn't genuine from within himself. If it didn't make sense to within himself, He couldn't do it. Anyway, so when I was a young man, I thought, okay, I'll pick a philosopher. So I read Francis Schaeffer, because Schaeffer, in one sense, was kind of, carrying on the stuff that from Kierkegaard. So Kierkegaard wrote stuff, and then Schaeffer took Kierkegaard's stuff and said, well, this is what it means in the modern world. And I was looking at some of this stuff again recently. I bought this big 5-volume set, The Complete Works of Francis Schaeffer, and I sort of worked through it in my sort of, early 20s. And and so he was kind of the philosopher that I picked. And reading some of that stuff now, like it's just frightening. Like 1976 or 1975, Schaefer wrote this thing saying, people think televisions are going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, you know, and they're going to be in public squares and places and everyone's going to come watch them. He goes, no. Televisions are going to get smaller and smaller and smaller.
Yeah,
and then eventually everyone's going to be walking around with a little television in their pocket and looking at it. And he says, and we'll all become predictable social molecules.
Wow.
This is like 40 years ago, this guy was saying this is where we're headed.
Wow.
And you kind of go, okay, you know, at the time I didn't get it. But like I'm really glad that I read that stuff back then, you know, and he talked about, you know, other things which were a little bit crazy, but like I say, you have to kind of push stuff to the point of being a bit crazy. And he wondered about, you know, experiments that would be done to work out how to change public mood through the water supply, because everybody has water in their house, and all the industrial processes use all the water. So if you can work out how to, and he made a comment about how even back in the 70s, when there was a very big football match on, like between, say, England and Germany, then the domestic violence rate would go up in each country as a result of this big football match, no matter who won or who lost.
Wow. So
he says, you know, there's this thing about this group behaviour which has all these kind of flow-on effects. And he said, you know, one of the things that people might try and do in the future is, well, if we put this stuff in the water, when, you know, like at the moment, the English have just made it into the World Cup final. So, you know, there's a whole lot of the British police bracing themselves for all sorts of shenanigans that's going to go on when this big football match is on Sunday. And I'm feeling a bit about this at the moment because today I just stuck my son on a plane and he's going to the UK and he's going to be in London on Friday. So I don't know what's going to happen. But
this is the Euro Cup final.
The Euro Cup, not the World Cup, sorry, the European Cup. It's the first time. And the English have never won the European Cup. So if they win it, it's going to be... But anyway, I mean, Schaefer talks about that. And he talks about, you know, how... Now, I don't think that anyone ever has put something in the drinking water, but it's certainly something that...
Other than fluoride, yeah.
Yeah, well, there's fluoride as well.
Yep.
But that's about teeth. But anyway, I mean, the reason I kind of talking about that now is, like, I don't see... Like, the people, the dead philosophers whom we are now sort of incarnating the thoughts of, a lot of them are kind of these postmodernist kind of knob ends. Sorry, I should call them that. People who I disagree with, and that postmodern idea of the fact that there is no meta narrative and that everybody has to kind of create their own reality. That's going to come home to roost and just create just mess. Like, and it already is just creating this massive mess. Yeah. And so I think, getting back to where we started, both Jesus and Einstein had this concept that there was actually a meta-narrative. There was a big story, you know, and they both had parts to play in an overarching story of, you know, God's salvation and God's plan and God's incarnation of his kingdom in the world. And doing that leads to really weird, and unforeseen consequences. But you still have to do it, as you say, even if you're not making any money, even if you're not actually, you know, able to kind of get any traction. My sister says that if you're a writer, recognition is like heroin. You know, you have to, you know, you have to have a sense that people are, hearing what you're saying, and that your writings are being
Right, well,
kind of,
people want to be heard. People want to be
heard.
heard. In the expressive medium, so a person, people want to be heard. But ultimately, look, you know what, God hears, and that's the thing. If you throw and we can talk about with the yes, we're giving it to the planet and giving it to the people, but ultimately, all that we do, God appreciates. I do believe.
Well, yeah, and that's
it's the
exactly
audience of one factor. That when you've got something to say. That's that. I love that Stevie Wonder song. Have a talk with God.
Yeah.
Have a talk with God.
I mean, one of the core things that Schaeffer says in his the final volume of his book, their volumes are a Christian view of Western culture, a Christian view of work. The last one is on a Christian view of art and culture, and he says that everybody is born with something to kind of contribute. Everybody has some creative ability,
Yes.
and he says that if you and you spend your life working on that thing which is your thing to do, and even if no one ever sees it, the fact that you've done it is actually, it means you've reached your destiny in the kind of the will and the kingdom of God. And so there's sort of over and over again stories that encourage me. There are stories of people that nobody knows who have changed history. And I mean, the ultimate story for me is the dozen or so. Well, we don't know how many people, but a bunch of people left England after John Wycliffe was killed, and they went to Geneva and they translated the Bible into English, and they stuck it in sacks of salt and they smuggled it back to England. Now, nobody knows who these people are, because if people found out who they were, they would have been killed. But they created this thing called the Geneva Bible. Now, the Geneva Bible was so popular in the UK that in the end, King James had to spend a massive amount of the government's money writing a Bible that was as good as the Geneva Bible. When Shakespeare quotes the Bible, he quotes the Geneva Bible.
Yeah, right, wow.
And so here's this group of people. Nobody is ever going to know who they were. But they did this thing that was theirs to do, to translate the Bible into English, and what they did completely transformed, because, Geneva Bible, then you have Shakespeare transforms English, and then, the Geneva Bible leads to the King James version of the Bible, which then spreads across the world and becomes this kind of standard thing. And that also creates the English language in one sense. You're like, when people use English, the things that the two biggest influences on the way that English is used across the world are, the writings of Shakespeare and the King James Bible. And both of those things came from the Geneva Bible. So it's kind of like this incredible kind of thing about how you do the thing you're meant to do, and you will have this impact, and you won't know.
Actually, there's a fascinating. I saw some stuff. Linguists believe Shakespearean English. We often think it's to be or not to be. That is the question. Like we're speaking like Patrick Stewart from Star Trek, or
Engage, Mr. LaForge.
What's his name? Or Gandalf. Speaking very correctly and properly. That's how Shakespearean English is meant to be, delivered. Yet linguists believe that it was actually probably more like an Irish, more like because so accents shift faster at the epicenter, at the and slower in the periphery. So, so to be or not to be, that is the question. Is that a dagger I see before me? Out, damn spot. So, which is quite an interesting concept. Hey, we should wrap it, I guess.
Yes, we should wrap it. I think the next time I'd like to talk about the Battle of the Two Naomis.
What is the Battle of... Okay, cool. All right. The Battle of the Two Naomis. We'll leave that for next time.
Two great feminist writers of the last 20 years. One's called Naomi Wolf. The other one's called Naomi Klein. And,
Okay.
they both wrote these seminal works, and they both went in completely opposite directions. And now Naomi Klein's writing weird things about Naomi Wolf.
All right, well, hold that thought.
Anyway,
We'll
so
deal with
that'll be our
one.
next one. The battle
All
of
right,
the two
the battle of the
Naomis.
two Naomis.
And how feminism eats itself.
Whee!
All right,
brother.
I'm probably in trouble for saying that, but if you want to see feminism eating itself, the battle of the two Naomis.
All right.
It's like a cat fight. It's fantastic.
I can't wait. I'm gonna end it. Here we go. And 1, 2, 3.